Hey everybody, welcome back to World History. We're doing section 3 today, so go ahead and get your notes out and let's get started. Okay, we're going to move the bubble up here today. So, the Allies are going to start to turn the tide at this point in the war. They're going to call for an all-out war. Governments are going to increase their power. They're going to turn their economies to their economic resources to war, like we talked about when we did World War I. They're going to ration and control amounts of certain goods out there. They're going to pass war bonds to raise money. Prices and wages will also be regulated. Now, this increase in production ended the unemployment of the Depression era. Rights will be limited, especially here in the United States and in Canada, where people of Japanese descent are actually going to be sent to internment camps. They're still going to be able to enlist in the military if they would like, but they're basically going to have a lot of their rights and their property taken away. We're also going to have censorship of the press with propaganda, trying to promote the war effort, very similar to what we saw with World War I. So women are also going to help win the war, specifically women in war industries, with Rosie the Riveter becoming the symbol for women who worked in war industries during World War II. There's also going to be a massive part of resistance movements, especially in France and other parts of Europe. So jump into the Pacific real quick. In 1942 and 43, this was a bit of a turning point. The Allies are going to forge ahead, and the Allied victories, there's going to be on four fronts: the Pacific, the North Atlantic Fleet, and the North African Front and Italy, the Soviet Union, and France. We're basically going to batter the daylights out of the Japanese Navy in the Pacific. At the Battle of the Coral Sea in May of 1942. This is the first time in naval history enemy ships never saw each other. It was more so just our planes were out flying in the air and just happened to engage each other. Our ships never directly went into contact. A big thing to talk about in World War II is the use of aircraft carriers, or ships that transport aircraft and accommodate the takeoff and landing of airplanes. The two biggest ones for the U.S. fleet is the Lexington and the Yorktown. And the Japanese are going to be prevented from taking important islands by our aircraft carriers. We're actually going to sink a number of their carriers and several cruisers and destroyers as well. Here's the Lexington. There's the Yorktown. We're both going to be involved in the Battle of Midway, which was primarily fought in the air. I have a really good supplemental video I'll show for Midway, so if you're watching this video version and you weren't in class, jump over to the supplemental video playlist. It should be over there. You'll just be looking for the one that has Midway in the title. The U.S. is going to destroy 4 Japanese aircraft carriers along with over 250 planes. This is devastating to the Japanese Navy. And after this point, Japan will be unable to launch any offensive operations with their Navy for the rest of the war. From here on out, they are on the defense. At the same time, the big three are plotting their strategy, that being Churchill from Great Britain, Roosevelt from the United States, and Joseph Stalin from the Soviet Union. Their plan was to finish off the Nazis before going after the Japanese. There's a lot of distrust. And this meeting is going to take place in Tehran, in Iran, in 1943. The Nazi-Soviet pact borders were still standing, and the Soviet Union had requested them opening a second front versus Germany. But the U.S. and the British did not agree to this. Stalin saw this as an attempt to weaken the Union, and this will fuel Cold War tensions that we'll talk about next chapter. But it definitely led to a bit of mistrust amongst the Allies. At the same time in North Africa, we have the Second Battle of El Alamein in November of 1942. This is Britain's General Bernard Montgomery versus Erwin Rommel, and Desert Fox's advance is going to be completely halted. This is essentially TP in the desert. They've stopped. The tanks are going to also be forced to drive back to Tunisia, where most of them are going to get stuck in the sand and be abandoned. So at the same time, we have to talk about General Eisenhower from the U.S., who takes charge in North Africa, resulting in a joint U.S. and British force in Morocco and Algeria. They're going to advance on Tunisia, entrap Rommel, and force him to surrender in May of 1943, essentially closing off the African front, and providing a jumping-off point for the British and the American forces to invade Italy from Africa, which they're going to do. The Britain and U.S. forces are going to take the island of Sicily, then southern Italy, and they're going to win in about a month. As this is going on, the Italian public is going to overthrow Mussolini in July of 1943, and signed an armistice in September of that same year. Germany's going to rescue Mussolini for the time being and open another front into Italy, but it was a decisive victory for the Allies and honestly took away one of Germany's biggest allies, Italy. At the same time, the Battle of Stalingrad is still going. This is the Soviet city named for Stalin. This is a major German target in 1942. The attack lasting from August of 1942 till February of 1943. This was a major turning point and one of the costliest. The German offensive was halted by the Soviet defense, and Germany will surrender in January of 1943 out there. The Red Army is then going to go on the offensive and start pushing into German-controlled territory. By 1944, the Soviet Union was advancing into Eastern Europe towards Germany. A little bit of information on the Battle of Stalingrad. Over 2 million troops were involved in the conflict on both sides, with about 1.9 million casualties. The average lifespan of a soldier that fought in the Battle of Stalingrad was about 24 hours, with winter temperatures being as cold as negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, with over 40,000 civilians also being killed during the battle. The Allies are going to continue their push towards Germany and in 1944 open a second front in France. With constant bombing of Germany and railroads and bridges in France, the D-Day assault in June of 1944 will provide the Allies their ability to invade into Germany. This was the Allied invasion of France through the beaches of Normandy, codenamed Operation Overlord, with 5 codenamed beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, each beach being assaulted by various countries, with, I believe, Utah, Omaha, and Gold, if I remember correctly, being primarily taken by the Americans. The U.S., the British, are going to break through and advance towards Paris, liberating the city. This is under the leadership of George S. Patton, and Germany is going to retreat. Within a month, France is free of German control. My apologies. The U.S. only did Utah and Omaha Beach. The British had Gold and Sword, and Juno was taken by the Canadians. These are some actual images taken on D-Day, some of the most famous ones. Probably the most famous recreation of D-Day is the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. We'll actually see a clip of that in a few minutes. So the Allies are going to continue to advance. And for 2 straight years, the Allies are going to bomb Germany, cripple industry, and destroy their morale. And in December of 1944, we're going to have the Battle of the Ardennes, also known as the Battle of the Bulge, in Belgium. This was Germany's last major offensive. The attempt was to a wedge that Germany drove into the Allied lines and form a bulge trying to break the line and retake things. At the same time, by April of 1945, the Soviet Union was advancing on Berlin. So here's the example of the bulge, trying to push back the American lines and take things back. So eventually, we have the Yalta Conference. Again, that mistrust is going to continue. The Soviet Union is going to maintain Eastern Europe, but the U.S. and the British want to give them self-determination. At the Yalta Conference, they're going to meet about the end of World War II. The Soviet Union said they could remobilize to fight Japan within 3 months of a German surrender. The Soviet Union would also gain Sakhalin Island, the Kuril Islands, and a zone in Korea as well. Germany will be temporarily divided into 4 zones, each occupied by one of the major powers: the U.S., France, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. But that is it for our notes today, so we'll talk more about that next time. You do not have an assignment for today except to finish your map, which is due at the end of the block. I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.